All right, cool. So here we go. This is what we have, right? The last little section of the significance of having a healthy and strong body. We want to talk about how having a healthy and strong body interplays with your soul. What does that mean for your soul? And I wanted to separate this out into a complete section here because there are a lot. I have a lot of thoughts on this one, and it's just and of course I'm going to bring in some biblical references, but it's important to have, and I would even say it's just important. It is mission critical to have that strong and healthy body for your soul, right? And it's like, why is it important, right? And I'm gonna go over three main topics, three main ideas, I guess, with an additional maybe one more, because now I'm thinking about it a little bit. I mentioned it earlier as well. So it's important. It's mission critical because of temple ownership, good stewardship, service. And then with a little caveat on the side, and maybe that's good stewardship. I don't know where that would fall under, but then that discipline that I spoke of earlier, very important in this instance too. So having a physically strong, and actually that's where I'll start. So having a physically strong and healthy body, it benefits your soul in a way of just that discipline. So you're building up in your actions and what you're doing, that discipline, that process, that code of behaving, right? That process is almost a one for one for your soul. So it's just like, I'll give you a silly example. You're scheduled to work out 3 times, lifting 3 times this week. And let's just say you do one, and it's like, and I don't feel like doing the other 2, you skip out on it. That branches off into other parts of your life, because who's to say, and nobody would really buy it if you say like, yeah, you know what, I'm not really that disciplined when it comes to my body, but I'm disciplined when it comes to my praying. Or I'm not really that disciplined when it comes to, staying moving and staying on top of things, but I'm disciplined when it comes to my reading. Like, and it sometimes there are different cases, right? Because everybody is able to do certain things, different levels of things, and all that fun stuff. But if you're not doing everything that you can just to make sure that you're able to do one of those things, like especially when it comes to service or be a good steward, right? There's a gap there. There's something missing there. In fact, it's like one of those things that it's strange. It seems to me, and I'm not saying this is indicative of the whole, but I'm just looking around and observing. It seems to me that there's a significant downplaying of the role that your physicality has in maintaining a strong and healthy and disciplined spirit, right? Like it's weird. Like, and even a downplaying of the process that is required to like achieve that, right? So it's like, and again, it's probably just like my sight. I mean, I'm only seeing a certain view, right? I can't see the entire picture because I can't see everything at the same time. But it just looks like there's a growing number of Christians who are just not at all. You know what? Maybe it's a generational thing. Because I actually see a lot of younger Christians really into their health and really, understanding that that's important and it's an important component to their lives. Like, I see a lot of Gen Zers that way. Now, granted, if you're talking about numbers, there really ain't that many Gen Z Christians comparatively to, like, millennial Christians or boomers who are Christians, right? It seems like there's a steady decline in younger folk, going to Christianity. But that's another story. It's just interesting that, and I could be wrong again, but it just seems like there's fewer Christians worried about having a strong and healthy body, and they seem to be almost overly spiritual, right? So, take that for what it is. But anyway, let's get started on this here, right? So it's important to have a physically strong and healthy body to basically support this idea of temple ownership, okay? Now, we're going to start with a Bible verse. I'm reading out the King James Version once again. We're going to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19 through 20, okay? And that says, "What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own? For ye are bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's." Okay? And basically that's just saying our bodies are temples or places where God is. Okay? Now, by taking care of our bodies, one is respecting and honoring the divine in us. Okay, that's important here because there are a few things to note about the temples, right? So if our body's a temple, we house the divine in our bodies. What's the significance of these temples, right? So there are a few things to note about the temples. The temple, in general, is where God and humanity overlaps. Okay, and I think there was like three main temples, right? So there was the temple with the children of Israel, with the tabernacle, and then Solomon built a temple, and I think Herod refurbished the temple, that same temple, and then we became the temple, right? So, and that's only after Christ's sacrifice, right? So we get there. It represents central places of worship, and it has like symbols of God's presence and focal points of religious life. The temple was considered to be God's earthly dwelling place. Okay, now again, we're taking all this, and there's more to this, right? I'll just jump right to it. So each temple was carefully and meticulously crafted and decorated. Wait a minute. What? Right? So basically what they're saying, the decorations and the crafting of it. So there's a point to all of this, right? They reflected God's glory. The beauty of the temples was a physical manifestation of God's glory and holiness, right? So decorating the temples was a form of obedience and worship. And what is that all, So I'm going to pause there real quick, right? Again, you have all of these temples with very specific directions as to how to build them, how to craft them, and to a point where every temple that was built, basically there was a team of the most skilled and talented people working on it, right? So the most skilled artisans, the most skilled in different cloths and different metals and different things like that. And the temple that Solomon built had a whole bunch of gold and artwork and different things. It was majestic to look at, right? So then we have these temples that were all carefully, finely crafted and decorated to show God's glory. And Then we have a period in time where the actual building temples were gone and we became the temple. Are we not expertly crafted and made? Yes. Are we finely decorated? What does that mean? So that's the thing, right? And yeah, I might get flamed for this one a little bit, but I've run into more issues with Christians talking about, especially when it comes to resistance training and you're trying to build the muscle. And I told you this before, way early on. I love the art of bodybuilding because I do see it as an art. I feel like we are so meticulously and carefully crafted and made, and to be able to move in a particular way, and just the muscles and the way they overlap and the way they connect and how they connect to bone, that is, for me, that's amazing. I've always loved it. And so I love the art form of bodybuilding, whereas a lot of other people, obviously a lot of Christians, will see like, oh man, well you're showing this, you're showing that, and it's just like, yeah, it is what it is, right? But it's just like, I'm not saying go out and get tattoos or anything like that. I'm not talking about that decoration, although I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's just, I'm not talking about that specifically. But I'm talking about like, if this is the temple that houses the divine, why are you not taking care of it? And why wouldn't you want to build it up to being strong and healthy and, you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't, so it's just like, I never got that argument that I only really get from fellow Christians. We're just like, they don't devote as much time to it, and then it becomes so here's the downside to this, though, right? And there's the opposite in it. And I'm just going to, stay here for a little bit more, and then we'll keep it pushing. But it's like, the downside is when building up your body, when building up the temple, you run the risk of, and this is actually what they did back then too, right? Of basically worshiping the building itself and completely forgetting about God. Here, it is a great risk because we are the temple now. We run the risk of worshiping ourselves. And of course, that's a big no-no, right? So you have to be careful, very, very careful. But just because you have to be careful doesn't mean that that's something that you stay away from altogether. Again, each temple was finely crafted and decorated, right? So, you ought to look good. that's what I'm just like, and it's like, and I know what territory that gets into. It's like, well, what's your definition of good? And it's like, hey, look, let me put it to you this way. There were a bunch of different kings who did evil in the sight of the Lord, who ate whatever they wanted, and it wasn't good for them. They did whatever they wanted, and they did it in excess, right? It did it too much. They weren't necessarily fit people, right? So don't hear what I'm not saying. Like, I'm not saying that, well, if you're a little bit on a larger side, you're a sinner, or you're sinning, or you're terrible, or you're not a Christian. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying be mindful of these things. Be mindful of how you come at the opposite, right? Because it's just like, just because a person isn't dedicating themselves, let's just say they work out every day. Just because a person is dedicating themselves to working out every day, to finally crafting and finally building up and decorating their body, just because they're doing that doesn't mean that they're not praying or not reading or not doing other things. So it's just like, they might have a different balance than you. Right. So, more so I'm saying, ease up off the judgmental stuff. Right? But let's get back to the point here, right? Because I know I feel myself going off on a tangent, but let's get back to the point here. You want a physically strong and healthy body because your physical body houses the divine. If we are to view our bodies as a temple, it calls us to a higher standard. Okay, it calls us to a higher standard of living, period, right? But it calls us to a higher standard of care and respect for our physical well-being. Now, next up, we have good stewardship. Now, we talked about stewardship at least 3 episodes, right? We talked about the parable of the talents. Talked about when I did the man show, all those, months ago. Oof, wow. All those months ago, we were talking about the idea of tending to the garden, to tend and to keep, right? The garden, right? Work, to labor, but to be good stewards of is to rule and to reign, right? Being good stewards of something, it means you're utilizing the resources properly. You're promoting things to grow. You're promoting positive outcomes abundantly, maximally, right? So we come up on this idea again here because we are to be good stewards of our bodies, right? God has entrusted us with our bodies. Caring for our physical well-being is a part of the assignment that God has given us, right? That's everyone's assignment, right? If we are temples here, it is our assignment to take care of the temple, to take care of that part that houses God. And lastly, this idea of like having a physically strong and healthy body aids us in our service. Okay. And for me personally, again, that's a very important idea. That's a very important notion. It allows you or allows one to serve others better and more consistently. Okay? There are so many caveats, maybe not caveats. There's so many nuances to this. I'm just going to maybe touch on a couple, right? But we could go on for days with this particular part of the topic, right? But it allows us to serve better and more consistently, right? And we already know from a physical perspective, you could stave off a whole bunch of physical issues, conditions, diseases, what have you, right? So taking care of your physical body helps you stave off disease and conditions, right? Which in turn allows you to serve better, longer, right? Because look, if you don't take care of your body breaks down sooner than it should. And if it breaks down sooner than it should, then that's cutting out the amount of time that you have to actually be able to serve. And I mean, think about it, right? Even with conditions that are a little bit more chronic or a little bit more serious, exercise can help with those symptoms. Keeping like exercise, nutrition, all that fun stuff, physically taking care of your body, taking care of your physical form can stave off those symptoms, allowing you to continue to serve, right? It's like I tend to make this comparison, right? 4 hours in a hospital bed is either going to simply get you to survive or get back to base level. 4 hours of exercise adds time to your life. Right? Now, and again, I get it. There are a lot of things going on out there, and not everybody is going to be able to do, this, that, and a third. Again, I said this before. The majority of people can do something, right? And it's just like, do what you can. Because again, there are still the mental benefits. There are still the emotional benefits, right? But there's that discipline that gets built in when you're doing what you can, especially if you have some chronic condition. If you have some chronic condition, but you still find a way, you become disciplined enough, and you keep lining up to get these workouts in, even though it's super uncomfortable. If you could do that in a safe manner, of course, right? But if it's super uncomfortable, you're building up that resilience. You're building up that endurance so that you can continue on further, for longer, and serve better, right? Because then that becomes your witness, right? I said I was only going to touch on a few of the nuances there, right? But not only that, like, I guess I need to touch on that witness part, right? So having a physically strong and healthy body allows you to serve for a longer period of time, right? But it also allows you to serve better in general, right? Because you're not all locked up with sickness or anything like that, or various conditions, or you have a flare up here, you're out for a week, right? You have a flare up there, and some things are tough to deal with. Some things are very tough to deal with. But sometimes the exercise, the working on the physical portion of your body, it allows you time, whereas if you did nothing, you would have no time, right? So for instance, let's just say you have a chronic disease. You pick it, right? And you actively want to serve, you actively want to help people, but you can't because you're dealing with these symptoms. Just getting a simple program together, doing some exercise, eating right, taking care of your physical body, doing all the things that you could possibly do to make sure that your physical body is okay, might only allow you one day out of the month. But that one day out of the month is better than no days out of the month, right? So it's just like, no matter what level you are in terms of your physicality, that's not the important part. The important part is not the level. It's the effort. It's the discipline, right? That branches over into everything else. So having that and look, let's keep it completely reality based here, right? Like, having a physically strong and healthy body also allows you to actively serve better as well. It's like, hey, look, church members moving somewhere. All right, you be the guy or you be the lady that's lifting stuff, right? You got to be able to do that stuff. Like, sometimes certain things call for your actual physicality. So that it helps you in that respect as well, right? So I wanted this to be a completely separate section because that is your physicality is important to your spirituality. And at no point should we discount that. We should not discount that connection. Okay?